Princess of Wales pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation. She set an example of selfless duty, a different future, full of hope for all people.
No one saw it coming yet. In one explosive moment, King Charles redefined the royal line of power, and everything changed. The air in Buckingham Palace was thick with tension as the official statement rolled out, brief, deliberate, and utterly unprecedented. In the history of the British monarchy, few proclamations have hit with such seismic force. The world expected traditions to hold firm, to resist change as it always had. But instead, the crown shifted not from a monarch to a successor, but from one queen to another, in spirit and in substance. In the royal statement, the language was clear, but the implications even clearer. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was to assume significant behind-the-scenes control of royal affairs, a power move previously unimaginable for anyone not already seated on the throne. Camilla, once elevated as queen consort and central to Charles's reign, had been quietly and effectively sidelined. Her role stripped of executive weight, her influence reduced to mere ceremonial duty. The shift was so pronounced, insiders immediately dubbed it a quiet revolution. What unfolded next shook the very foundations of royal hierarchy. Sources from within palace walls confirmed that this wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was a calculated redistribution of power. Catherine wasn't being handed a title, she was being handed the monarchy's future. Every public engagement, every diplomatic initiative, every decision that would shape how the royal family appeared on the global stage now passed through her hands. It was a strategic coronation without a crown, a shift no one could have predicted, but in retrospect, one that felt inevitable. In the days following the announcement, whispers surged into headlines. Analysts called it a seismic shift in royal power dynamics. Commentators dissected every word, every gesture, every hidden meaning. Between the lines, why had Charles chosen now? Why Catherine? And why not keep Camilla at the center of the fold? The answers weren't just buried in palace documents, they were embedded in a story of trust, legacy, and quiet transformation. The public response mirrored the palace's internal upheaval. Some hailed the move as visionary, a necessary step toward modernizing the monarchy. Others voiced discomfort at Camilla's sidelining, recalling the decades it took for her to be accepted by the nation. But beneath the noise, one truth was inescapable. A line had been crossed, and the crown's future now bore Catherine's fingerprints. But to understand why Charles made this move, we have to look at the storm brewing behind palace walls. This wasn't a sudden impulse, it was a decision forged in silence, shadowed by conflict, illness, and legacy. Behind Buckingham Palace's polished gates, a slow-burning crisis had been unfolding, one that even the most seasoned royal observers failed to detect. King Charles III was no longer the unshakable monarch he had once appeared to be. Whispers of health issues had begun to swirl among palace aides, and though officially downplayed, the weight of those private struggles began to press hard on his public responsibilities. For the first time in his reign, Charles found himself contemplating not only the survival of the institution, but its evolution without him at the helm. As the world's attention remained fixed on ceremonial appearances and photo ops, tension inside the palace escalated. The media grew more intrusive, probing deeper into the king's capacity, his relationships, his legacy. Royal correspondents began reporting unusual changes in scheduling, abrupt cancellations, and extended absences. The pressure mounted not only from the press, but from within advisors, senior royals, even longtime allies began raising concerns about the monarchy's direction. In hushed tones, the question was no longer about continuity. It was about control, and who would seize it when the time came. And then, chaos erupted outside British borders. A provocative statement by former US President Donald Trump questioning Canada's sovereignty over royal representation sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. The Commonwealth, a symbolic foundation of royal influence, suddenly felt fragile. Countries once seen as loyalist strongholds were now reassessing their allegiances. Republican movements in Australia and Jamaica gained traction, fueled by discontent and generational disconnect. With geopolitical ground shifting, the monarchy could no longer afford to appear outdated or indecisive. Public sentiment followed suit. polls showed a growing appetite for change. The younger generations were no longer enchanted by titles or tiaras. They wanted empathy, action, and relevance. And while Charles's efforts to modernize had been met with polite applause, it was Catherine who consistently captured hearts. Her warmth, her presence, her steady consistency all radiated the one thing the monarchy desperately needed: stability with humanity. She wasn't just admired, she was trusted. But while the headlines screamed of Camilla's quiet fall and Charles's declining strength, something else was unfolding in the shadows. For years, Catherine had been preparing. Her public image may have been serene, but behind it was a woman studying, strategizing, learning from every state visit, every diplomatic encounter. She met with world leaders not as a royal appendage, but as a quiet force. Insiders now admit she had been positioned deliberately and methodically to take control when the time was right. And that time had arrived. And while the world was looking elsewhere, Catherine was already assuming power without a crown. No palace intrigue, no loud takeover, just steady hands, brilliant planning, and the birth of a queen-in-waiting. Catherine's ascent didn't come from a thunderclap of drama, but from the slow, deliberate accumulation of trust, respect, and quiet influence. While others made headlines, she made headway, building a foundation not with force, but with grace. In every room she entered, she left behind more than a smile. She left a sense of control. Diplomats took note. Foreign leaders remembered her. Palace staff called her composed. And slowly, behind the scenes, the true power began to shift. There was a time when Catherine was simply seen as William's bride, a future consort, a supporting figure. But that time passed quietly, almost invisibly. She reshaped herself through action, not ambition. Her initiatives in early childhood development weren't symbolic, they were strategic. They showed a royal invested in the roots of society, in lasting change, not fleeting applause. When the Earthshot Prize launched, it was Prince William's face at the front, but insiders knew Catherine shaped the message, calibrated the vision, and managed the tone. She wasn't playing catch-up to the monarchy's future, she was drafting it. That became most clear during the royal visit to Canada. While King Charles delivered historic speeches and Camilla performed her ceremonial duties, it was Catherine who orchestrated the trip's underlying success. Behind every diplomatic handshake, every public address, there was Catherine ensuring alignment, tone, and political resonance. She knew what Canada needed to hear. More importantly, she knew what Charles needed to avoid. Palace aides didn't whisper it, they said it plainly. She's the monarchy's soul now. Not the face, not the air, the soul. And that soul didn't emerge by accident. It was crafted with discipline, humility, and an acute understanding of legacy. Catherine didn't ride Diana's coattails, but she understood her. She didn't mimic Elizabeth, but she studied her. The result was a woman who carried the weight of royal history while quietly rewriting its future. She became a modern echo of both monarchs, dignified, beloved, yet resolute. Her branding, while unspoken, became clear. The People's Princess 2.0. But this version didn't just walk into adoration, she earned it, inch by inch. Still, her rise was not without consequences. Power, even when silently claimed, leaves shadows in its wake. With Catherine's influence expanding, space had to be made, and that space would come from someone who had once stood at the center of the stage. But with every rise comes a fall. And for Camilla, it was swift, sharp, and quietly devastating. Behind the public smile, Queen Camilla was facing a personal and political dethroning she never expected. To the world, she maintained the composure of a seasoned royal waving, attending, performing her duties with practiced grace. But within palace walls, the truth was undeniable. The woman who had once stood beside the king as his closest confidant and queen consort had been quietly pushed to the sidelines. Her operational authority, once a pillar of Charles's reign, was stripped away, piece by piece, until only the ceremonial mask remained. It was not a fall from grace in the public eye, but a redefinition of relevance behind closed doors. Camilla's presence at key meetings was no longer required. Strategic discussions that once included her were now led by Catherine. The woman who had spent years clawing her way into public acceptance was now being asked to step back into the shadows she had only recently escaped. And although no official words confirmed her diminished role, everyone inside the palace understood what had happened. She had been gently but firmly dethroned. The wound was deeper than just the loss of influence. Camilla's entire royal journey had been steeped in controversy. From the day Diana's name became a ghost between her and Charles, she had lived under a cloud of skepticism. No matter how much she tried, no matter how much charitable work she championed, the public never fully embraced her. Diana's legacy clung to her like a second skin, one that neither time nor effort could entirely peel away. Even as queen consort, she was tolerated, not loved, present but never truly celebrated. And yet, her contributions were not insignificant. Camilla had worked tirelessly to bring attention to issues few royals dared to highlight: literacy, domestic abuse, the plight of forgotten women. She wasn't just fulfilling royal obligations, she was fighting for causes she believed in. But now, with Catherine rising, those efforts seemed to vanish from the royal narrative. Her advocacy was politely acknowledged, but unmistakably overshadowed. The message was subtle but sharp. Her time at the helm had ended, and she hadn't even been told when the countdown had begun. According to palace insiders, Camilla was informed of the decision weeks before the public learned of it. She listened quietly, nodded, and gave no resistance. But behind that silent acceptance was a deep, cutting disappointment. As one senior aide revealed, she knew, she accepted it, but it hurt. Years of loyalty, of enduring public scorn and private battles, had earned her a seat at the table only for it to be pulled away, just as she'd finally found comfort in the role. Yet what made Catherine worthy of this power wasn't popularity. It was what she did when no one was watching. While others played roles, Catherine played the long game and won. In a world obsessed with visibility, she mastered the art of strategic invisibility. She didn't fight for headlines or force her presence into the spotlight. She didn't need to. Her power came from patience, precision, and an unshakable sense of timing. Catherine understood that real influence isn't broadcast, it's built, brick by brick, behind closed doors and beneath the surface. And by the time the world realized what she had done, it was already done. From Africa to Europe, Catherine's diplomatic record speaks for itself. She moved through international arenas with a balance of warmth and authority, crafting a royal identity that resonated across borders. Unlike her predecessors, she didn't lean on protocol as a shield, she used it as a tool. She engaged with world leaders like an equal, not an ornament. Every speech, every conversation, every moment was calibrated. Her ability to be both regal and real made her not only likable, but lethal in terms of soft power. She wasn't just a representative, she was becoming the monarchy's anchor. Behind that polish was mentorship few ever knew about. Former Prime Minister Theresa May, known for her stoic leadership and unflinching pragmatism, quietly advised Catherine on navigating power with subtlety. And then there was the ghost of Queen Elizabeth II, not just a historical figure, but a model Catherine studied deeply. From the Queen, she learned the art of restraint, the power of presence, and the value of never overplaying one's hand. Catherine merged these lessons into a leadership style that was uniquely hers. Quiet but commanding, traditional but transformative. But strategy alone doesn't inspire loyalty. Empathy does. And Catherine, beneath the tactician's surface, made herself human. Her emotional Christmas speech in 2024, where she spoke of resilience and the silent burdens carried by everyday people, didn't just soften her image, it made her unforgettable. When she opened up in rare interviews, she didn't give away scandal. She gave away sincerity. And that, more than any PR maneuver, won the public's trust. She didn't demand it. She earned it. While others chased attention, she built results. Initiatives were launched. Partnerships formed. Crises averted, all without a single self-congratulatory gesture. Catherine's impact grew not because she claimed it, but because she couldn't be ignored. In every corridor of power, her influence echoed louder than any title ever could. and those closest to the throne began to see what she was becoming, not just a consort in waiting, but a leader in plain sight. And Charles noticed deeply, emotionally, and with the weight of his legacy in mind. In private halls, away from cameras, Charles made a decision driven by love, fear, and the weight of history. He didn't consult the press. He didn't gather the public. This was not a move made for applause. It was a move made from instinct, one only a man facing the limits of his reign could truly understand. In Catherine, Charles saw more than a daughter-in-law. He saw continuity. He saw the steady hands he once hoped to find in himself. And for the first time in his monarchy, he acted not as a sovereign, but as a father, looking beyond his own crown to the future he might not get to guide. Behind the closed doors of Clarence House, aides report a single phrase that captured everything. Catherine is the future. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was said with calm certainty, the way one names an heir not by bloodline, but by merit. Charles, grappling with his own health and the harsh realities of time, knew he needed to act before nature did. Legacy, to him, wasn't about lineage. Anymore, it was about leaving the monarchy in hands capable of commanding both reverence and relevance. Catherine had become that bridge. The decision wasn't easy. The specter of mortality had cast its shadow on him more frequently in recent years. He'd fought through his ailments in silence, but the toll was undeniable. Every moment spent on duty was now measured against what he could still shape, what he could still secure. And with every passing week, the image grew clearer. He didn't want to risk Catherine's potential getting buried under the weight of outdated tradition. If she was ready now, and he believed she was then, the time to act was now, because waiting might mean too late. In Catherine and William, Charles saw something he never truly had in his own time with Diana, a true partnership rooted in unity, mutual respect, and stability. They weren't just performing for cameras. They were building a vision. They represented the monarchy not as a relic, but as a compass. And Charles knew the world needed to see that future emerging, while he was still here to guide it into the light. He wanted to shape the transition, not just witness it. And that required a bold gamble, transferring meaningful authority while he still wore the crown. It was a risk that could spark criticism, whispers of abdication, even friction within the family. But Charles understood something few monarchs ever admit: power, if clung to for too long, becomes a cage. He wasn't giving up the throne, he was opening a path. By empowering Catherine, he wasn't weakening himself. He was strengthening the institution. He had chosen foresight over ego. And though Charles's voice crowned her in private, the world quickly saw the change unfold in public. As news broke, the globe held its breath, and then exploded with praise, confusion, and raw emotion. The announcement from Buckingham Palace rippled far beyond the gates of Windsor. It was more than a shift in royal duties, it was a signal to the world that the monarchy was no longer waiting to evolve. Social media erupted in a frenzy. Within minutes, our Queen Catherine was trending across platforms. One user captured the sentiment perfectly. "She's the real queen now. No crown needed." Thousands echoed the same thought. Catherine had crossed an invisible line and taken her place, not by decree, but by public conviction. But as with any seismic shift, the reaction wasn't universal. While countless voices celebrated Catherine's quiet power and grace, others mourned what it meant for Camilla. Sympathy poured in for the woman who had fought through decades of scandal and rejection, only to be quietly sidelined just when she appeared to have found firm ground. Commentators noted the bitterness behind the transition, a graceful removal cloaked in royal language. The public, for all its admiration of Catherine, couldn't ignore the human cost. The emotion wasn't just excitement, it was grief for one woman's rise and another's retreat. In Canada, where Charles and Camilla had recently visited, the news was met with a mix of curiosity and optimism. Local media praised the monarchy's willingness to evolve, speculating that Catherine's rising influence could reinvigorate strained Commonwealth ties. "This could be a turning point," one editorial read, "a monarchy that listens, adapts, and reflects the world it hopes to lead." From Australia to the Caribbean, headlines followed a similar theme. Catherine represented a bridge between generations, between tradition and progress. Across the Atlantic, in Washington and Brussels, analysts took a more strategic view. This wasn't just about personal preference or generational change. This, they argued, was a carefully orchestrated pivot, a move to align the monarchy with a global climate increasingly skeptical of inherited power. Catherine's public approval ratings, her polished diplomacy, and her modern sensibilities were not only welcome, they were vital. In an era defined by transparency, accountability, and relatability, the monarchy needed a new face, and in Catherine, they found one that could carry centuries of tradition without being crushed beneath it. The media quickly crowned the moment. The dawn of a new era. The relatable monarchy. The silent queen. Every headline painted Catherine as a beacon for a future monarchy that wouldn't hide behind velvet curtains but step forward, speaking clearly and directly to the people it represents. But behind the admiration, there was also curiosity, because in this institution, every shift, no matter how subtle, carries deeper meaning. Yet the story doesn't end here, because behind every royal announcement lies a deeper agenda. Beneath the celebration, whispers of abdication, succession, and silent rivalries swirl through the palace. While the public fixated on Catherine's newfound authority, behind the gilded doors of Windsor and Clarence House, a far more dangerous story was unfolding. Insiders now say the shift in power wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. King Charles, aging and increasingly reflective, is said to be quietly preparing Prince William for an earlier-than-expected transition to the throne. Though publicly denied, the signs are undeniable. Meetings once overseen by the king are now being led by his son. Catherine isn't just supporting from the sidelines, she's guiding from the front. But this rise hasn't come without resistance. In the shadows, Camilla's closest allies have begun to push back, unsettled by her sudden marginalization. For years, these figures operated as a powerful inner circle, steering Charles's public image and guarding his legacy. Now, they find themselves sidelined by a younger, sharper, and far more popular team loyal not to Camilla, but to Catherine. There are murmurs of betrayal, of decisions made in silence, and of a quiet purge happening behind palace walls, one that's replacing the old guard with a new one, brick by brick, title by title. The tension at the heart of the royal family is no longer about personality, it's about purpose. The divide is clear: modernization versus tradition. On one side, a monarchy rooted in centuries of ritual. On the other, a rising power determined to make it relatable, flexible, and above all, relevant. Catherine's ascent has become the symbol of that future, but it's a future not everyone within the family is ready to accept. Some royals have expressed frustration at being left in the dark, blindsided by announcements and strategic pivots they weren't part of. The once unified royal machinery is now split by quiet distrust and whispered doubt. And for Catherine, this is the most delicate terrain she has ever walked. With every decision she makes, she must balance transformation with diplomacy, strength with softness. She must soothe bruised egos while carving out a new vision. She is both the architect of the future and the keeper of the peace. It's a role no royal has ever fully held before, part leader, part mediator, part revolution in a silk glove. Her every step is measured not just for public perception, but for family stability. Still, one truth remains unshakable. The shift has already happened. And though it hasn't been declared on paper or etched into law, the world feels it. Catherine's name now commands weight not just as William's wife, but as a figure reshaping the destiny of the monarchy. And now, with power in hand, and the world watching Catherine's next move, could redefine history itself. She has no crown on her head, yet Catherine already wears the weight of the monarchy on her shoulders. With each passing day, the reality becomes harder to ignore. She's not waiting to become queen consort. She's already stepping into the role of sovereign in all but name. Every carefully worded statement, every globally resonant initiative, every calculated public appearance bears her signature. In the silence left by Charles's partial retreat, Catherine's voice has become the one that defines the modern royal image. She's no longer simply following the institution's direction, she's steering it. From mental health advocacy to international diplomacy, her reach is everywhere, and it's intentional. Palace insiders reveal that most global engagements, from Canada to the Caribbean, are now being quietly shaped under Catherine's influence. While King Charles remains the figurehead, it is Catherine who's redefining the monarchy's purpose, translating ancient traditions into contemporary relevance. She's neither clinging to the past nor dismissing it, she's adapting it for the future. This isn't ceremonial duty. This is governance through legacy. And in doing so, she has transformed Charles's reign from transitional to visionary. His greatest legacy may not be his time on the throne, but the woman he chose to guide it forward. The decision to empower Catherine was not just an emotional act of trust, it was a radical move to secure the monarchy's survival. Charles knew that to truly lead the monarchy into its next era, he needed someone who could speak to the people, command the world stage, and still hold the crown's dignity intact. Catherine became that person. Meanwhile, Camilla's future hangs in ambiguity. Though still queen consort in name, her role has receded into the purely symbolic. Public appearances remain, but her influence has been curtailed. The woman once elevated to share the throne now watches from the side, a respected presence, but no longer a pivotal force. It's a delicate balancing act, one that underscores just how dramatically the royal center of gravity has shifted. But make no mistake, none of this was accidental. Catherine didn't stumble into power. She claimed it, quietly and methodically. Her ascent is not the result of a vacancy, but a victory. A conquest waged not with scandal or spectacle, but with poise, foresight, and unshakable resolve. She didn't wait to be crowned, she became indispensable. And the institution followed her lead. So the question isn't if she'll lead, it's how far she'll go, and whether the monarchy and the world are ready for her. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.